Hello, folks, and welcome to this week's episode of UMF Social Media and Politics. This week we are going to be discussing the Chinese internment camps along their eastern part of the country. Some quick background information. Since 2017, China has been detaining the ethnic minorities, Uyghurs and Turkish Muslims through both re-education programs and work programs in the Xinjiang territory. They claim it is because these groups are more likely to commit terrorist attacks. This stems from two attacks, one in 2013 and one in 2014, by a terrorist group claiming to be one of these minorities. However, there have been no attacks from these groups since the initial two attacks. The human beings that are being detained in these centers are being put in there because of their religious values as well as their ethnicity. These people are being treated like enemies of the state solely because of their ethno-religious identity. These centers are shrouded in secrecy, and despite credible reports on these re-education centers, Chinese officials deny their existence. According to the BBC News, memos that were leaked about these re-education centers include orders to officials such as to never allow escapees, increase discipline and punishment of behavioral violations, promote repentance and confession, and to ensure full video surveillance coverage of dormitories and classrooms free of blind spots. This week joining me, I have Sam and Brandon. My name is also Sam, so I'm gonna start off. So, have you two ever heard of the Chinese internment camps before this class? Brandon?
No, surprisingly, as astounding as that would seem, this has never even, I've never heard about this at all, which is insane because this is a major occurrence going on, and yet it's nowhere as far as the public eye.
Sam, have you heard about it before?
I also have never ever heard about it before. I've never seen it in any news or anything like that. It's never been brought up. I've never heard an ounce of it muttered to anything.
Perfect. Have you both either heard of the treatment that was going on there, or what is your opinion on it even? Sam?
So, I mean, I know what's going on now. So basically, from my understanding, they're basically forced to do a lot of labor, and they're really treated pretty poorly, much like the U.S. has a bunch of our immigrants in detention centers as well. So I'd say they're pretty equal in that sense, except I think it might be a little more intense in China, although I'm not too sure. But I know that they were treated very poorly, and they're basically getting like free labor out of them. They live under strict policies and the rules. Like you said, they have a no escapee.
Yeah, so it's basically a prison, except the only difference between the prison that we would think of here in the U.S. and these camps over in China is the fact that the only punishment, or the only crime, that these people have committed is believing in their religion. And unfortunately, the Chinese government has decided that because of that, and based off some very, very loose evidence, that they're going to take this entire group of people and force them into these camps where they have no choice over anything whatsoever.
Believe the Chinese government should do next, or even on the international system as well. Personally, I think they should put an end to these camps. These are humans, by the way, and we should treat them like humans.
Obviously, I don't think there's any question that these camps should be shut down. So as far as China's involvement, I think that's the first step of many that they should be taking to rectify the situation. But on a more global scale, I think absolutely the United Nations or some sort of group as such should do something about this. China needs to be held accountable for these atrocities, so whatever that might look like.
I also think that after they release them, they also need to provide them some sort of compensation, because I'm sure that they've been in prison, or what do they call them? Internment camps for quite a long time. So I'm sure that they've been displaced from their homes, probably definitely lost their jobs, and I can only imagine like re-matriculating into society would be quite difficult for them.
Yeah, I know some of these minorities who were actually told these camps would be better working opportunities, were told that they were actually going to make more money from the jobs than they were making back home, but they're actually making a lot less if they're even getting paid. As for the international level, personally, I think it might be hard to hold them accountable since China does hold a seat on the UN Security Council, which is one of the most powerful sections of the United Nations. I know for a fact that the US is also on the Security Council, and it has used its power so that it is not held for any actions that it has committed in the field of human rights and violated people's rights. I can talk about Hiroshima, for instance. We charge Nazi war criminals, but we never charge the US for innocently killing thousands, millions of people. We have our ICE detention facilities, which people are dying because of disease every day, and we saw an uproar, but we don't see that anymore, and the US can use its power on the Security Council so it can just fly under the radar. Do you think China could do the same thing? Sam?
I think they have, and they continue to do so. Obviously, since I believe the lid got blown open back in 2016, I believe it was, around there. So this has had quite a lot of focus on it, and there's been like you said, a huge international outcry about it. But in terms of follow up, and it just seems that it's died down a lot. And since then, they've just kind of been allowed to do whatever they want, seeing as they're a big international power, and they have a lot of the trade power, and they also have a lot of stronger allies as well in Russia and the Middle East. Not to mention their natural resources and like I said, their command over the market makes them pretty untouchable for a lot of different international powers, I believe.
Yeah, Brandon?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Excuse me. China's definitely taking advantage of this. Why wouldn't they? This is something that they feel is right. So why would they feel like they have anything to explain? And also, as you said, the U.S. has done many, many horrible things that they have just been looked over for, that they should have been held accountable for. So why wouldn't China take advantage of that? So I think this is a perfect example of what's wrong with the UN system. I don't think, as a whole, I think it is an amazing idea and it's a fantastic system that we have. I just think it's outdated in the way that it's still conducted. I think a lot of the laws and rules within the UN need to be changed so that no matter what the country, or no matter who the country is, no matter what they do, they should be held accountable for any atrocities or for any violations of basic human rights, no matter who they are.
Yeah, and I know someone mentioned this earlier, but we did kind of see a media die down of what is happening in China. And our class is about social media and politics. Is there anything the media could do? Social media, people like us going around maybe tweeting or sending out awareness about it, or even journalists. Is there anything else that they could do?
So I believe actually I think the overall media problem is actually with China as a whole. As I'm sure you're aware of, they have a huge censorship issue where if they see anything as a threat to their democracy, I believe that or communism really, but they have a knack to just shut it down or completely erase it and pretend like it never happened. So I believe if there's a change, I think it would have to come from inside the country, and I'd say more like freedom of the press and freedom of internet access and stuff like that. So that way the people themselves can educate themselves on what's going on, and from there come together and kind of unite and have their voice heard.
Brandon, do you have any thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with Sam. I think that's the biggest issue is the censorship, which is preventing a lot of information from being spread. But I think what people who can't, do anything about that situation need to do is just be informed. Just learn as much credible information as you can, and just keep, informing others of that credible information through things like this podcast, which are really important to making sure people know that this situation is going on.
I agree with you both completely. A good example of this, that's, these internment camps are still going on, but with current news and the coronavirus, people weren't allowed to talk about this on social media in China. People were arrested. Doctors had posts taken down, legitimate doctors. And I think media censorship is something that should be taken very seriously. On that note, I don't have anything else to say personally. Do either of you have anything else to say?
I hope that this issue gets resolved and the people can experience freedom and stop being persecuted in China. I also want to thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I just want to thank you as well as the rest of the class for allowing this podcast to happen. This is something that's really important for, like I said, informing those who have no idea this is going on, because like we noted before, Sam and I both had no clue that this situation was occurring before we had this class. So it's very important to get this information out to people who have no clue that this is even going on.
Perfect. I agree with you both completely. I'd like to thank you all so much for listening to us today. I'd like to thank both of my guests today for our class broadcast. And I believe that concludes it. Thank you.
Ooh.